You ought to make some movies and star your family. You ought to take some movies, for oh, what stars they will be.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Film Photography Podcast, the podcast about film. And this show,
what show?
We're going to be talking about movie film. And what I love about the Film Photography Project is that many shows and topics really happen organically. Things kind of just fall in our lap, and I say to myself, or say to Owen, or say to Leslie, or Matt, or Mark, or anyone, hey, let's do a show about this, because a lot of people are asking the same questions over and over. And today's show is about movie film, somewhat specifically about 8 film, because the Film Photography Project recently initiated a whole 8 support system, making new film and making development available, scanning available. And of course, the big proponent for 8 film has been, well, you, Owen.
Oh, gee, thanks.
And I think you were most excited about 8 film coming out in Ektachrome.
Yes, because, when Ektachrome went away a couple of years ago, or more than a couple of years ago now, that was sort of the end of color reversal, at least Kodak products color reversal in regular 8. And so I kind of switched to black and white reversal because I'm somebody who likes to project my film. So I'm super excited that the FPP is leading the initiative to get Ektachrome on regular 8 because it's such a great format for that film specifically. Because it's just so gorgeous. It's such a gorgeous looking film.
And folks watching, the go-to home movie format, amateur format, short film format, is and has been Super 8 film. It's a very popular format. The FPP also supports Super 8 film, but a lot of people have been finding these 8 cameras that belong to their father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and the emails are really a few a day sometimes, a few times a week, of people sending me an email saying, hey, I found this camera, can you recommend film for it? Now that 8 film is readily available for people's home movie cameras, the next step in the evolution is I would like, and I know you would like, people to shoot it at the proper exposure so that when they're finished shooting, they get a satisfying experience of getting their movies back.
Yeah, comparatively with Super 8, which is a cartridge that is notched. There's literally a notch in the plastic of the cartridge, and when it slips into the camera, it tells the camera exactly how to expose the film. And that was the attraction of Super 8 when it came out. You didn't have to do anything. You slip the cartridge in, you press the button, and that's it. A lot of regular 8 cameras, well, all regular 8 cameras don't really work that way. There is some kind of adjustment the user needs to do to make sure the camera's set for the right exposure. And some people just aren't aware of that. And all the cameras are different. And I know today we're going to be talking about kind of the difference in some cameras and how you set the exposure and what cameras can deal with what film speeds and all that good stuff.
Right. I guess we could break it into very simply into 2 categories. A completely manual camera, and where someone has to use a light meter to figure out what turn the f-stop on your lens to expose your film properly, and completely automatic cameras, which I guess came out where, in the 1950s?
Yeah, I was doing some research on when fully automatic, meaning the camera basically opens and shuts the aperture for you and determines the exposure through a meter. And Bell and Howell, one of the most famous motion picture camera companies in the world at the time, touted that they came up with the very first fully automatic movie camera. It was actually the 200EE. That's this camera here. It's a magazine camera. And they claim that this was the first fully automatic movie camera. I don't know if that's true, but I can tell you it's the oldest automatic movie camera that I have. And there were some variations. I would actually say that there were three categories. There was fully automatic, fully manual, and then semi-automatic. And semi-automatic just means that the camera has a meter built in, but the meter doesn't actually change the aperture. It's basically just kind of like a handheld meter that was stuck onto the camera. It gives you a reading, and then you manually adjust your aperture. And then, of course, some fully automatic movie cameras do have the ability, both in regular 8 and Super 8, for you to manually override the meter and change the aperture yourself.
I just take it for granted that I've been shooting movies my whole life, and I get out my fancy Goss and Luna Pro meter, no sweat. Hey,
Right.
what's the f-stop? But folks shooting today, I need to put myself back to where I was when I first picked up my dad's camera.
In 1978?
1981.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I was fortunate enough that my dad owned a Bell & Howell Super 8 camera, and all I had to do was pop the cartridge in.
Right.
And I didn't think about anything.
Yeah.
And I think, for the most part, looking at the number of people that are using film photography project motion picture services, except for the few who are shooting student films, most people just want to pop the film in. And
Yeah.
in the case of the regular 8, they want to pop the film in.
Sure.
So I would like to talk about the automatic cameras because so many emails are coming in regarding these. But let's talk about the simple formula. If someone's picking up a Bell & Howell 134 camera or a Revere 8 Model 88, which seemed to be a super popular model because it seems there are millions of them out there. You have your camera and you have your lens, and on your lens is f-stops to set.
Right.
So I send emails, very comprehensive emails to people, but that doesn't mean that the emails I'm sending is being comprehended.
Sure.
Because it is, I just think back to when I actually had to learn manually. It takes a little, right?
It does. I would say if you use a manual regular film, still photography camera, 35 millimeter SLR, you already know the basics for photography, which is the shutter speed and the aperture and the film speed. It's the same concept with movie film. Each frame per second, which is how many frames are going through the camera every second, that translates to a shutter speed.
Right.
In regular 8, I think it's 1/35th of a second. And then, of course, you have an aperture opening. So you set your meter for 1/35th of a second. You set your film speed, your ISO, and you get an aperture, and that's it. It's no different than your regular still photography, SLR or whatever you're using. But for people who maybe don't do that, I think you do need to know those basic concepts. But it's super simple. Even a fully manual regular 8mm camera, 16mm camera, it's super simple.
Generally speaking, I noticed that maybe 3/4 of them have no frames per second adjustment on them. For example, the Revere 888, it's doesn't say anything. I had to research it. I actually bought the manual, which I highly recommend if people try to find the manual online. But I found that at 16 frames per second, which is the native frames per second for double 8,
right,
that your shutter speed is 1/30th of a second.
1/30th.
So
Okay.
people may say, well, why is that important? Well, in order to know what the f-stop is, the aperture on the lens,
Right.
the little opens and closes.
Yep.
You need to use some type of way to meter your light. And I always recommend that people download for free Light Meter app on their phone.
Works great.
Do you use that?
I do. I usually use it when I'm nervous that my Goss Pro is not giving me the right meter because I'm paranoid.
Right.
So I a lot of times I will double check it, and it does. It works great.
So if you have a meter, whether it's a handheld meter or the light meter app,
Mm-hmm.
you dial the shutter speed, 1/30th of a second, into the meter,
Right.
along with the ISO, also known on the side of old cameras, ASA.
Right. Yep.
The ASA of the film. The ISO ASA is telling that's a guide of how light sensitive the film is.
Exactly.
The higher the number, the more light sensitive. So up until just last year, the only 8.8 film that was available was the FOMA R100, which was 100 ISO, which in my opinion is a little fast.
It is.
For some of these older cameras. So it was a struggle. I found it to be a struggle that if you're shooting in broad daylight and you're shooting at 16 frames per second and have no choice, that your shutter speed is 1/30th of a second, that 100 speed ASA ISO film was a little fast, and I just told everyone to just turn your
all the way
lens to
close.
F22 or F16
Right.
and shoot. But by putting this information in your light meter, it will give you the f-stop.
Yep.
Now, there's a lot of information on the web, and I really encourage people to use that Google, because you'll find all sorts of articles, and everything we're talking about is so basic that it applies to still photography, motion picture photography, and you really just need to know the key things. What's the shutter speed of the camera? What's the speed of the film, the ISO, ASA? And what f-stop openings do you have?
Exactly.
If you search neutral density is basically a filter that cuts down the amount of light going into the camera, and those are very helpful when you need to cut down the amount of light, and you could hold that over your camera lens, which I do.
And some old camera manufacturers did make specific ND filters for the cameras. So look on eBay. Just search by the millimeter of the lens and you should find it. And by the way, I've had people ask me whether or not you can use ND filters with black and white movie film or color film. And the answer is yes, you can use them with both. It doesn't matter. It will work beautifully with color film.
Right.
It'll work beautifully with black and white.
Right. You can send email to us, podcast@filmphotographyproject.com. We do look for feedback. Feedback is really awesome. I'd love to hear from you folks, whether you're sending an email or commenting here on YouTube, because we really want to get people up to speed with their home movie cameras. Just this morning, before we started recording, another email came in. An email came in, which was like almost the same question.
Hot topic.
Hot topic. And the question was, this is from Parker in St. Paul, Minnesota. And he said, hey, I'm thinking about ordering film for this vintage movie camera I have. It's a Keystone K12. Parker was kind enough to send like a little advert that I guess he has the booklet, so he sent a picture.
Nice.
So he's saying, would 8.8, Cine 8, 100 ISO be the best film for this camera? Well, it's a great question because it's the most readily available film in our shop, because our 50 ISO color and our 50 ISO black and white sells out as soon as we put it up in the shop.
Crazy. Everybody loves it.
It is. So I looked at the camera. He sent me some pictures of the camera as well. My first question to him was, is there a dial on the side of the camera that has numbers on it, like 10, 25, 40?
Right.
Because in looking at the brochure he sent over, I said, aha, this is a automatic camera, and it's designed to just load the film, set the ISO, and shoot and have fun.
Right.
But the dilemma has been, and we're trying to fix this by offering more films, is that the readily available ISO 100 film, a camera like this and so many others, there isn't an option to dial 100 ISO on the camera.
Exactly.
Which means that you would what? You would overexpose your film.
Absolutely, you would. And, you know, there are two solutions to that. You could try to find a film that is 50 ASA. Most of these cameras that are fully automatic from that era go from like 8 to 40, 8 ASA or 8 ISO to 40 ISO. Because at the time, the fastest film on the market for consumers, movie film, was Kodachrome. And that was 40. And we don't really have any regular 8 movie films that are under 40 at the moment, although maybe in the future we might. I think definitely in the future we might, but right now we don't. So 50, if you shot 50 ASA in your camera set at 40, you'd probably be fine.
Yeah.
And then of course, if you're using an ND filter, and like Mike said, if you hold it up to your camera, I don't have a large ND gel with me, but if you hold it up to your camera, you take the factor of the ND. So ND is either usually 4, 2, or 8. You take your ISO, and then you times that ISO number by the ND factor, and that'll lower your ASA. So if you had an ASA 100 and you were using an ND4 filter, that would take your camera setting down to ASA 25. So now all of a sudden, you can use your fully automatic camera set at ASA 25 and expose it perfectly. But I think for some people, that's getting really complicated and technical and too much. For some people, that's just too much.
It isn't. It is and it isn't. Let's put it this way. There are things that I've shot in the past, my whole life, where you see how to do it and you just do it. Mm-hmm. And you kind of just mimic, maybe not even understanding the technical. So, and I think this is very important because as 8.8 Ektachrome film becomes more readily available, I mean, that's the film people are going to want to shoot on vacation.
Absolutely.
To take, I mean,
summertime.
And they may want to, summertime, project it in your projector. So when you mentioned about the ND filter,
mm-hmm.
that filter would actually have to, I mean, some of these older cameras, like the one you were holding up, has like the massive, what do you call that?
This is the actual selenium cell. This is the meter, and that's an important topic. I don't know if you want to get into that right now, but that's an important topic. The difference between meters and in old cameras.
Well, that's important because you'd have to put the ND over that, not over your lens. Over that light sensitive. What did you call it? The selenium sensor.
It depends on how you want to do it. If you can absolutely just put it over your meter. A lot of old movie cameras have the lens, and then they have almost a separate lens for the meter, and you can do that. But if you don't want to do that, what you can do is, again, do the math to figure out if, when I put that ND filter on my lens, how am I adjusting my ASA? So, for example, like I said, if you're using an ND4 and 100 speed film, that's going to jump your ASA setting down to 25. And I think that's the easier setting because, if your meter is working, then all you have to do is set it at a lower ASA and you don't have to worry about it. And you're getting a perfect exposure. So you could do it either way. You could just put it right over the selenium cell or the CDS cell, or you can put it on the lens and dial the adjusted ISO.
I think what blows people's minds is the fact that unlike shooting with your phone or shooting any digital format, there's no instant gratification of seeing if what you're doing is working.
Right.
So
that's what makes it exciting.
It does. It does make it exciting.
And expensive.
So it's the massive expense.
Yeah.
And the massive excitement of seeing, if it's working or not.
And regular 8, by the way, is a great format to start out because it's one of the most affordable movie film formats right now.
It is. And on the subject, let's see if this email is any different. This gentleman, Kevin Jones, has a Sears Tower electric eye, 3-lens, 8mm. Sounds fancy.
It does sound fancy.
I was seeking user manual or at least help with the late 50s, early 60s Sears Tower 8mm. I've been enjoying digitizing old footage from my collection. he'd just be appreciative if I can give him some feedback, I guess, as to how to use the camera. So this question is identical to Parker's question, which
Right.
is it's an old Sears Tower with a big selenium cell on the top
Yep.
of it, and it's designed for probably maximum 40 ISO film.
Probably.
So
And the problem with selenium, so there are two basic, I won't get super technical, but they're essentially, for these old cameras, there are two kinds of meters. There's a selenium cell. They usually tend to be really big on the camera. And this is from not exactly this camera, but the same model. This is what a selenium cell looks like. It almost looks like a quarter, a $50. It's got a coating on one side, and it's metallic on the other. And this requires no power source to use. If you have an old meter, again, that doesn't have a battery, it's the same thing. Rolleiflex used selenium cell meters. You don't need a power source, and this coating is almost sort of charged and photo or light sensitive. And over time, these will fail, almost always. And if they don't fail, then they start to lose adjustment. And so some of the problem is also that if you get a camera, even if you're using an ND filter, that meter may be off. So the first thing you need to do is if you have a camera with a meter like this you want to use, make sure you're checking it against a handheld meter or your photo app, because it may go bad. I can tell you I've had 5 or 6 of these Bell & Howell 200 EEs. They're all bad. The selenium cells on them are all bad. Every single one of them.
and how did you discover that the cells are bad?
Because when I put batteries in it, because although this does take batteries, it doesn't actually power the cell. It actually powers the aperture ring on the lens. Every time I try to expose something, it would open it all the way. It would open the aperture all the way. So that told me that the cell was bad. And unfortunately, there used to be a company in England that would make these for you, and they're now defunct. So at the moment, there is no solution to this problem with selenium cells.
Right.
Now, the other kinds of meters that you'll find in the camera, like for example on this Canonette, is what's called a CDS cell. And a CDS cell tends to last longer. It tends to be a lot more precise. A camera like this can actually be dialed in from ASA 10 all the way up to ASA 320. And CDS cells, you know you have a CDS cell when you have a little battery that you need to put in the camera to actually power the meter. These tend to be a lot more reliable. They tend to be a lot more accurate. So if you have a camera that has a CDS cell, a movie camera that has a CDS cell, takes a separate battery just for the meter, you're probably in good shape. And later regular 8 cameras, this was made in the 60s. I mean, Canon made a couple different models that took CDS cells, and other manufacturers did. Those are great because you can load those up right now, put your battery in, set your ASA to 100, 400, well, in this case, 320, I should say, and you shoot and the camera does the rest. But again, the difference is whether or not the camera takes a battery for the meter or it doesn't. If it does take a battery for the meter, chances are you're in good shape. If it doesn't, and it has one of these old selenium cells, make sure you test the meter reading because it may be off.
Right. Right. And the same advice applies to older Super 8 cameras that had a separate button cell for the internal light meter.
Exactly. Another good topic to discuss that I think we see a lot in the film that comes in this is an old Brownie 2.7. It's an 8mm camera.
Yes.
Really similar to the Fun Saver, which I know, Mike, you love.
They're tanks.
They are. They always work, and they purr like kittens. It's great.
Yes.
So on the and this is true for a lot of the cameras, especially for example, I think the some of the older Bell & Howells and some of the old Sears Tower cameras have a like pre-adjusted or sort of suggested lens openings or apertures based on the conditions that you're filming. So for example, it says bright sun if you're on sand.
Right. Don't believe it.
Don't believe it, because these were preset. These sort of guessing, they would actually call these computers. Believe it or not, this was called a computer. It's not what we think of a computer, but that's what it was called. These are adjusted for ASA 40 Kodachrome or at the most ASA 80, which would have been the black and white film that Kodak made. And so if you are shooting in bright sun and you set your camera for bright sun and you're shooting your Fomapan 100 or your Ektachrome, it's probably going to be underexposed.
Right.
Because or I should say, I'm sorry, it's going to be overexposed because this is adjusted for at the most ASA 40. So that, I think we see a lot of film come in where it's overexposed or underexposed. And you know, I would do the same thing. If I didn't know, I would just say, oh, great, the camera says I'm in bright sun, so that's what I should set it at. And then they shoot their film, and it's overexposed or underexposed, and I think that's the culprit.
We send a sheet out with every piece of film that we sell at the FPP with a tip guide, and one of those tips is to not use the guide on the side of your camera because it's a guide for film that no longer is produced.
Right.
It's tricky, and hats off to all of the shooters out there who are picking up these cameras for the first time and shooting them. And I have to tell you, we get a fair amount of film here at the FPP for developing and for scanning. And although I've seen some disappointments, generally speaking, with the scan and modern technology of the scan, you can salvage quite a bit of the footage if it's grossly underexposed or even overexposed.
Yeah, and I think people, if you've never shot movie film before, and even like the first movie film I shot in 2002, which was on Kodachrome, and you could still get it and develop it, it looks like garbage. I mean, it's shaky. I didn't know what I was doing, but...
Well, that's another topic.
That is another topic. But I watched that. I projected it. I was 11 years old, and I was blown away. And that was it. I was hooked. So I think a lot of people, even if they maybe don't get the perfect results, they're still amazed by like the magic of it and the feel of it and the excitement of getting the roll back. And I think that makes people and encourages people to just keep trying and have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that this show...
What show?
What show? I'm hoping that this show, specifically about movie film, is of interest to people. Please leave comments below. And the comments, if you have questions or comments, that will kind of inspire us to do another show based upon the comments that you leave below. Hey, many thanks to the folks at Super8.tv. Did you see that swanky article?
Oh, my gosh. So cool. So cool.
I'm a little scared at the amount of emails I'm going to receive from Europe asking about 88 Ektachrome.
Hey, we'll ship it most places, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. But we'll put the link below. Super8.tv did a nice article about what we're doing here at the Film Photography Project to bring movie film back. We haven't talked a lot about Super 8, but that's fine. There's a lot of resources for Super 8. There's Pro 8mm on the west coast of the U.S. I mean, that is the hot format. As folks who have been listening to this show know, we tend to go back to still film, 620 film, 616, 116 adapters, so you could shoot your old Kodak folding cameras. 88, bringing that back. And then, of course, which is gaining in popularity in the FPP online store, people purchasing double perforated 16mm film.
Gotta have it.
Because some of their old Filmos and hand-cranked 16mm cameras do not take the modern single perf film. So there's a lot of movie excitement going on, and I'm excited about it because I really think that this is just the beginning, and that, in a few years from now, we're going to be talking about or having shows specifically about the FPP Film Festival.
Right.
Where we'll be showing films that you shot.
Right. Absolutely.
And that could get a lot of fun around Halloween.
And there are, there's so many things that Mike and I are working on in terms of different kinds of film, formats. I mean, there's constant projects on how to get more film, more formats out there for everybody to use. and it's going to be a super exciting year for movie film.
Yes, it is.
And then
Yes, it is.
after that, we're going to tackle 126, right?
Oh boy, that's a whole other topic.
One day.
Yes, it's really a matter of researching and finding. It's really finding the gear to make the film happen, and I'm very confident it's going to happen. I'm shocked it hasn't happened. I really am.
Film
I'm completely
Ferrania, I
shocked.
think, is our last hope.
Film Ferrania in Italy. They are my hope for everything. They are, and you know, I always say, hey, I'm going to jump on a plane and go see Nicola.
Hey, you got people over there, right? You got people. You got people.
Yeah, I got people over there. Folks, you could write to us, podcast at filmphotographyproject.com. Just you know, send us a note or leave a comment below. Please subscribe to our channel. We're on the Instagram, Film Photography Project. We're on the Facebook, all these places.
Absolutely. And can I also give a shout out to my friend, my little buddy, John Fideli?
Oh, yes.
Just want to make sure that, you know, he knows I say hello.
It would be much funnier if he actually watched these. But I will see him later today. I will relay
Absolutely
your comments. Okay, folks, we're going to see you super soon.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Ha 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 ha.